The fastest growing group in the U.S. is Latinos. We've heard a lot about what that might mean for politics, but there's also an increasing number of Latino students in schools across the country. MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, has a case right now in New Mexico that claims that the state has failed to provide young Hispanic, Native American, and African American students with the education the state's constitution requires. The head of MALDEF recently stopped by our studio and sat down with our producer, Sarah Gustavus, to talk about that lawsuit and the impact of Latinos on politics and life in America.
Tom Saenz is with me in studio. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You're president and general counsel for MALDEF. That's a Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. The organization started 50 years ago, nearly 50 years ago, and a lot's changed since then, including the demographics of our country. There's a lot more young Latinos in the United States now. That means more Latino and Hispanic students in schools and more voters in election years like this. What's different about the work you're doing today versus when you started in 1968?
Well, in 1968, you could accurately describe the Latino community in the United States as regional, concentrated in the southwestern United States from Texas to California, with pockets in Chicago, New York City, and South Florida, whereas today the Latino community is a national minority group. We are the largest minority group in the country and have been for a decade, and we are represented in significant numbers in every region and virtually every state in the country. And it does mean that more and more policy issues nationally will center on the Latino community. For example, in public education today, 1 in every 4 public school students nationwide is Latino, and that's a measure not only of the importance of education issues nationally to the Latino community, but it's a measure of what the expectations will be of Latino community members in the future when those public school students will be in the workforce, will be expected to be leading, not just in the workforce, but in voting and in the development of our country.
And the Latino community is very diverse in the United States right now.
It is, although the significant portion is still Mexican American. We now have significant representation from Central American countries. We still have significant population that is Puerto Rican and Cuban American. And increasingly we have significant populations from South America.
And here in New Mexico, we also have lots of families that have connections back for generations here in the United States that identify as Hispanic and Latino.
Yes, although we have grown, we have been here from the beginning. And for many folks, they can fairly say that their family didn't cross the border crossed them, because they were here in New Mexico or in Arizona or California, their families were, before it was part of the United States.
Do you see that identity playing out in how people are thinking about education? Let's talk specifically about a case here in New Mexico. MALDEF has filed a lawsuit looking at disparities in outcomes for Latino, Native American, and African American students. Why make the case so broad, not just Latino students?
Because we're talking about an education system, and if you're sitting in a classroom, you want to make sure that not just the Latino kid is having their needs addressed, but their neighbors, their peers, their colleagues are having their educational needs addressed, because it has ripple effects on everyone in that classroom. So the Martinez case is really about trying to ensure that New Mexico is investing in an adequate and equitable way for every student to address the needs of every student, and furthermore, that the state is monitoring how those resources are allocated and spent at the local level to ensure that we're seeing real outcomes changing for particularly those groups like the ones you've mentioned that have for decades and decades seen significant education gaps. And those gaps have to be addressed, not only for the Latino community, but for every child, so that we can expect them, each child, to make their contributions as adults to the greatest of their potential.
What evidence did you guys bring forward in your case?
So we are in the process of gathering evidence today. The most important development thus far is that the trial court has concluded, which was not a foregone conclusion, that the New Mexico State Constitution does include the right to an equitable and adequate education. Education is a right in the New Mexico State Constitution, which had to be established first. So we are now in the process, our lawyers and those we work with, to gather evidence from experts, talking to experts from both sides, and gathering evidence from parents and students and teachers and principals about their experiences. But what we have seen, and is being reinforced by this effort, is that the education gaps are not improving sufficiently enough, and that there are inequities in how resources are allocated within the state of New Mexico that particularly affect the communities you've mentioned, as well as special education students who we added as a focus after the case was filed, because we were finding so many issues with respect to that population.
As we talked about just a minute ago, New Mexico has a lot of families, a lot of Hispanic and Latino families. 48% of our state, according to the latest census numbers, does identify as Hispanic or Latino. So how does this case compare to other cases around the country where you might have a case on an education issue in an area where Latinos are a much smaller portion of the population? Does that change anything at all?
I think where we have done these cases, there have always been significant Latino populations. Obviously, no state matches New Mexico, which is why it's so important. It is the state with the highest proportion of Latinos in the population. But in all cases, we're looking for where there are significant numbers of Latino students. And with our community, because there tend to be more children, younger people, younger age on average than other communities, even if the total population number is not yet at a particularly high level, there still may be higher representation in the public school system. And it's critically important for the future that we address the needs of all of those public school students across the country.
We are in an election year. A few years ago in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down key parts of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. You work on Latino voting issues as well. What does that decision mean for the 2016 elections?
It means that we don't have the same monitoring and the same intervention from the Department of Justice that we would have seen in past presidential elections. What the court struck down in Shelby County was the coverage formula for the pre-clearance obligation. And that obligation required jurisdictions with a history of low participation by minority voters and a history of taking steps that deterred and prevented, in some cases, minorities from voting. They were required to pre-clear any electoral change and ask the Department of Justice to evaluate the change for whether it was intentionally discriminatory or had the effect of going backwards with respect to minority voting rights. So now no one is subject to pre-clearance across the country, and it means that we don't get advance notice of changes, including things as seemingly mundane but critically important to turnout as moving precincts or consolidating precincts. We won't get the same advance notice of those changes in covered jurisdictions. We won't have the Department of Justice evaluating those changes and intervening to prevent them. So there is a danger that in covered jurisdictions, and even in jurisdictions that were not covered, that we will see changes not subject to challenge prior to their being in effect. And that could affect the vote.
Vote, where voting places
Exactly, exactly.
Another one we hear people talking about a lot is voter ID. Is that an issue that you're looking at?
Yes, voter ID in covered jurisdictions would have been subject to pre-clearance. Indeed, in the neighboring state of Texas, it already had been reviewed under the pre-clearance standard and rejected. But that went out the window with the Shelby County decision, and it had to be relitigated as it has been under a different section of the Voting Rights Act, which is very expensive and took lots of resources, ultimately, though, to find similar problems with voter ID in that state. So voter ID, restrictions on voter registration, both on those registering and on those who seek to go out and register people, restrictions on early voting, limiting the availability of time to vote prior to the election. Those kinds of changes are of concern. Even beyond their direct impact, they have the effect of attempting, sometimes succeeding in deterring people from actually going out and exercising a right to vote that they have.
Specifically on voter ID, though, a lot of times you're wanting the voting system the elections to be secure, to make sure people are not voting when they shouldn't. How does MALDEF respond to those?
Well, we respond by pointing out that the fraud is the allegations of voting fraud. That is the fraud. There is nothing to support any allegations of significant voter fraud in this country. They've tried, and no one has ever produced evidence of significant voter fraud anywhere in the country in the last 50 years. Okay, so we are really talking about a non-existent problem and putting in place measures that would deter participation and in some cases prevent participation, even though we are attacking something that does not exist.
What's next? You're also working on lawsuits involving deferred action. That's DACA and DAPA. We've talked about it here on the show in the past couple of months. It seems like people are waiting to see what happens with the next administration. Is that the same for the legal action, or is that continuing?
Well, the legal action, United States versus Texas, which the Supreme Court deadlocked 4-4 in June, continues. And in fact, what is pending with the Supreme Court justices is a petition for rehearing, asking them to rehear the case once there's a ninth justice in place to avoid the 4-4 vote. And they haven't decided on that. The earliest they might decide is the end of this month. But we are hoping that they will allow the case to be reheard with 9 justices. And we believe that that case, where we represent at MALDEF the interveners, 3 Texas mothers who are eligible for DAPA once it's implemented. We believe that with 9 justices, the nationwide preliminary injunction will be lifted, and those initiatives, Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and the expansion of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, will move forward. And that's important regardless of who is elected president, because it then resolves the legal question, any legal question, that may surround a president's use of their prosecutorial discretion to target enforcement resources and ensure that those who are not priority enforcement targets have protection from the daily fear of being put in detention or removal. And that is often a fear, as you can understand, that extends to their children, often United States citizen children who go to school and are expected to perform in school with the possibility in their heads that they could return home from school and have a parent or both parents not be there because they've been placed in detention or removal.
Does the future look hopeful for you?
It absolutely does. I am very hopeful as the Latino community becomes more and more prominent on policy issues. I'm hopeful that the interests of that community, which I think are in the best interest of the whole country, will begin to prevail. And I believe that the Latino community's long history of contribution in service to our country, including military service, including public elected service, including nonprofit service, is a very, very positive sign for our country.
Tom, thanks for sitting down with us this week.
Thank you.